All right, so just to let you know that I was born in Spain, so I have the Mediterranean culture, so I'm willing to improvise more than other cultures, I suppose. And I wasn't planning on talking about this, but I also, during lunch, heard a few people that said, oh, it would be interesting to hear more details about how Kinect works under the covers, under the hood, since there are like a number of you, at least, that are running some research experiments using Kinect. So I figured, well, maybe I had one slide deck there that I could use to at least tell you some of the work that goes underneath the Microsoft Kinect device that we did actually in MSR. So let me first see, because it's quite popular in the United States, but I'm not sure how popular it is here. How many people know what the Kinect, this device, is? Could you raise your hand? Okay, so most people know. So the idea is here that you are the controller. The revolution from the point of view of the person that doesn't know technology is that there was a lot of excitement with the Wii, because you could hold this and you don't need to have this controller that has all these buttons. That there were a lot of people that love it because it's like shooting more and more Martians and more people in aircrafts and everything. But many other users just didn't really enjoy it. Whereas with the Wii, you could play. So this was kind of like the idea of the next generation, where you don't even need to hold anything. Just use your body. And that's what they use. You are the controller, the slogan. This is just for those of you that may not know the kind of games that you have. So you could be running, playing people. You don't hold anything. You don't need to be afraid that you're going to throw your Wii and break the TV. My son once punched me with the Wii here, so I remember that. So we were quite involved in Microsoft research in the development of Kinect, and we loved it because it was really fun technology. But the thing that really struck me from a social point of view is when I was reading some of the reviews, and there was this reporter that had written an article about the Kinect and was describing the hardware and all the things that you could do. And he had a little story that was really touching. So I was there, and there was my 6-year-old son. Was looking at me, not saying anything. Normally, he can't keep his eye on attention on anything for more than a few seconds. He was there looking for minutes and minutes, constantly looking without doing anything. And after a while, he comes and tells me, Dad, I also want to play with the Force. So that was so touching, because the kid, to him, in technology, he's been watching so many science fiction movies that this is just natural. And so, well, of course, the Force, I've seen Star Trek and Star Wars. I want to play with the Force too, and I want to kill the bad guys with my hands. And so this is really something that gets into a whole new generation of users. That's why it was so exciting. And it was thrilling to see that we actually have something to do with creation of this technology. And in fact, it was quite successful in the marketplace. I mean, according to the Guinness World of Records, it was sold like 8 million in the first 60 days. So that's quite amazing. And I have to tell you, we were working on the device very directly with them, and we had doubts. Not that it would sell that many, but it would sell at all. Because we look at the ship date when they were going to ship it and say, but this is not working. How are you going to ship this? It's like, oh, we couldn't believe it. So this is one of these cases where eventually you try and you cannot get the rabbit out of the hat, and finally in the last minute you manage to do it, but it was a close call, let me tell you. So what does this Kinect sensor have? I mean, all of you probably, I guess, have seen what it looks like from outside. So let me show you what it looks from inside in case you haven't seen it. And this is what it is. Although maybe some of you have taken the plastic out and haven't seen it. I like some of these tinkers that play with this. Basically has an infrared projector, and you may have noticed that this, which is this one here, essentially shines some light. And it looks like red, but actually you're seeing a tiny, tiny fraction of that light, because most of them is infrared, which you cannot see. But you see a little bit of red. So the idea is that it shines a lot of light, illuminates the scene, and I will show you how, but you can't see it. So you can play when it's dark, which is like a nice thing, or it doesn't bother the interference of all these lights. We'll see why it's important that this is infrared as opposed to using the visible spectrum. Here you have an infrared camera. So what this means, and we have the RGB camera to take a picture of the normal light, the normal camera that you can imagine. So we have a camera like this, and then another camera that takes another picture. But this picture is different because it's taking a different light spectrum, infrared. Why is that important? Well, hold on, and you'll find out a little bit later. And we have 4 microphones and a motor. This thing will move up and down, USB cable, and these guys, once they're going to make millions of them, they manage, doesn't matter how much technology you put, they can put it for like a small price. So by the way, there were some depth cameras, which is what this and this do before. This was not a new idea. If you look at the research community, you'd see depth cameras around for a while. Most of them were used in military applications. You can imagine that the soldiers in the military was very interested in seeing exactly where is the target so that I can shoot it, right? But these devices were quite expensive. There was like $10,000, $40,000, $50,000 for some of these devices. So it's quite a feat of engineering just to shrink all of that, make it much cheaper, and in many cases, better than the expensive ones. So I don't want to know if the military is using this for these applications. I don't want to know, but I would not be surprised. So now I'm going to tell you, this is kind of like the introduction of Kinect for gaming. But there are lots of things going on using the Kinect for more than just games. So I will tell you, just give you a picture of what those things are, and then go in more depth into some of the technologies, especially that we develop in MSR, on audio, depth, and skeletal tracking and head pose. So one of the things that was very exciting is at a week after, I think the Kinect launched in November 20th, 2010. A week after, there was this website called Kinect Hacks. Someone had figured out how to intercept the depth signal and plug it into a PC and do all kinds of things, all kinds of interesting things. We were telling the product group, we should think about providing some SDK for researchers, hobbyists, and other folks that want to use this for other applications other than just gaming. And we said, I bet in 6 months, someone will figure out how to do it if you don't do it, so we might as well do it ourselves. And they were so busy with the gaming things, and I said, we don't want to hear. They had just finished, and as I said, it was really close because it wasn't, although the prototypes worked, the product was not working for many, many things. It just took so much time just to get everything settled and shipped properly that they didn't even want to hear it. We're saying in 6 months, I bet someone will do it. In 1 week, someone could figure out. And it led the community, just wild. Now, lots of researchers playing with it. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, which is really exciting, right? In fact, when I prepared this talk back in December 2011, there were already 62 pages of this website. Everyone contains several experiments, some guy trying something. Really exciting. Every few hours, new applications. So a lot of researchers are using this. So one of our friends in the product group came up with a video of saying, okay, you convinced us, let's move ahead and look at things other than gaming. What are the kind of things that we can do to increase even more the imagination of researchers? And they came up with this video, which I thought was pretty nice.
We started with a sensor that turned voice and movement
Are you here?
into
Okay.
magic.
Xbox. Play.
We thought this would be fun to play with. something amazing is happening. The world is starting to imagine things we hadn't even thought of. Unexpected things. Helpful things. Beautiful things. Inspired things. Which is why, even though the world keeps asking us what we'll do with Kinect next, we're just as excited to ask the world the same thing.
So I thought this was a pretty inspiring video. So if you're looking for a topic for doing research, you may also want to consider doing something here. There are lots of things that you could do with this device. In particular, I chose this as one out of many because it happened to be a company in Spain that got an award internally for developing a very unique application. So let me show you.
We have several fields of interest in our company. Some of them are related to hardware, to embedded platforms, embedded computing, but the one we have won the contest with is one related to healthcare. This is where we have been working with Microsoft Kinect.
When I received the Kinect, I was told to study the device to take advantage of the different technology, allowing the user to use the different applications and programs in a natural way. Our main intention was to try to provide to the doctors a first version of the product in order to get their feedback.
We are not working in this voice application because the doctor wants to use it, but till now what they are trying is using gestures. It's situated inside the operating room. In this way, they can avoid potential bacterial infections.
It's amazing to have a product, to have a device that integrates 3D camera, VGA camera, microphones.
Because of the quality of the technology, the real-time performance was something incredible when you are talking about 3D.
I think that Microsoft is doing a wonderful thing with providing all the developing community with this technology.
One great thing of Kinect is that you have a lot of things inside this small package.
We hope that this system will be installed in the different operating theaters.
It's kind of cool for the doctors to use this kind of technology where they don't have to touch anything.
We are going to integrate technology in our life in a simple way.
What we have seen is only the beginning.
I wonder, since I have a number of clips, what it would be better for me to try to use the handheld microphone. That way I don't need to do this often. So in the meantime, we eventually convinced our friends in the product group to release this SDK so that you can do more and more things. That's the website in case you want to go and download it. The recent one, yes, let me try this. Maybe I can, where is it? Switch. Yes, so the most recent version was 1.5 that was released a couple of weeks ago, I think. And it adds features that had been involved, including some of the games, such as face tracking, so the system can also track your face. I will show you how that works. And other more functionalities, so this is 1.5. Okay, so before I go into the next version, which is telling you how the audio works, or the depth sensor, skeletal tracking, do you have any generic questions on just the Kinect sensor? This would be like a good time before we jump into the next part. Yes?
I'm just wondering why the Kinect has a VGA camera and has a better camera. Because a normal size
Actually, that's a very good question. I wonder that myself. I don't know. I will ask them. I can see that this is, on the other hand, not the first time they hear that question, so I would not be surprised if they are listening to it. Yes. So all I can say is a very good question, and the product groups are listening to it, but I'm happy to tell you everything that I know about the research aspects, but I cannot comment on product versions. Any other question? So one of the things, I mean, the SDK that you get from the open community will give you the depth sensor information. It won't give you the audio, for example. So you can't get the audio. So you cannot do any of the audio functionality. You cannot do the beamforming that I will show you, the echo cancellation, the speech recognition. You can't get any of that. Also, it doesn't give you typically some of the higher level routines, such as skeletal tracking, so you can track what I'm doing. I mean, you could build your own, and there are pieces where in some cases you could do some of that, but I don't think it's as robust. Or facial expression and head pose. So some of these features are not included there. But that doesn't mean some of them could not be built. So someone could potentially do it. So, you know, you can play with both and see if you're interested. Okay, so let me just quickly show you what is the use of speech recognition in Kinect, and then tell you what is that we've done to make it happen. The simple example that I'm showing here is the one that the developer from the product group that came and told us that they wanted. So, well, he wanted something very simple. I'm watching TV, and normally I want to stop it because I want to go and get another beer or something, or someone calls, or I want to get back. And I want to get the remote just for the TV. And how often is it that you're looking for the remote, and you look, and you can't find it? Who has the remote? Not me, not me. I don't know. Get up, look under the pillow. Where is it? Who has the remote? So he wanted to get rid of that scenario where you say, Xbox, stop. Just go get the drink and come back. So initially he had something very simple dreams. You can actually go and get the popcorn, and you don't need to fight to figure out where the remote control is. So why would you want to get speech recognition into a device like this in general? Well, the first version mostly was emphasizing gesture. I mean, all the games, all the dancing was gesture. But speech recognition beyond the stop and play is a useful technology because it's actually complementary to gesture. Like there are some things, if you're like a dance game and you're going to dance, you just want to use gestures, so then just move around. You don't want to use speech. But there are many cases, even in games, where you want to speak. For example, there was a game called Kinectimals. Oh. There was a game called Kinectimals. And what Kinectimals was doing is, I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's targeted to little kids, that they have a little tiger, a little lion cub, and you can pet them and you can play with them. Well, how cute would it be if you can say, sit, lion, sit, come here, jump, you know, all these other things. So I mean, you see, I saw some of the reviews, like some of the kids playing with this, and they have so much fun. So that'll be interesting. Another scenario is where you want to do voice control of what's going on. And there's a simple potential way of doing it, which is you devote part of the screen with buttons and you do like this kind of thing and select it, right? That's a possibility. The problem with that is that means that you reduce the screen size for what you want to do. If you're watching a movie, now it's not full screen. Not so much fun, you know. I'd rather have full screen. So if you don't want to use on-screen buttons, voice control seems like an appealing solution. Also, accessing long lists. Sometimes You may have like a long list of things that you want to do. Let's say that you're searching for movies to watch. Well, potentially you could like scroll and scroll, and eventually you will get the movie that you want, but the list is so long that you just rather say, speak it. And this is just what I want, right? Just get it. So there are many cases where speech recognition will be helpful in a setup like this. So what are the challenges? Because all of this, pretty easy to believe that this would be good. Well, it turns out that to do speech recognition, you need relatively good quality audio. If you look at most of the speech recognition systems that have been deployed, either have like a headset microphone where the microphone is really close to the mouth, and therefore you pick up the signal in very little noise, it's very directional. Or sometimes in some of the phone systems, you have the phone and it's here relatively close. But when the developer from the product came for us, he said, no, I don't want any of that. I want a device there, and you sit over there and you speak. He said, well, look at the distance. So we record this, we play back to you, and all you hear is noise. And yeah, you can hear the voice, but the problem is much, much more difficult. And definitely there have been some research prototypes on this, but nothing that was working with speech recognition at that distance, because the speech energy is going to decrease inversely proportional to the power square, to the distance square, whereas the noise is the same. So that was a very challenging problem. And to make things worse, guess what? A lot of the times when people are doing this, they're playing a game that is like with explosions and all kinds of noises coming out of the speakers. And because a lot of us now want more realistic scenarios, we don't have a mono signal, we have 5.1 Dolby. And the subwoofer makes you bounce when the explosion hits. So it's really, really loud. And we need to do speech recognition with all that? You've got to be kidding me. That's the first thing that we told him. But the guy was very patient. So I said, I want you to try, please. So who can say no? A researcher gets a challenge like that and get fired up. Okay, let's try it. But it's hard. You got all these loud gaming noises. You're watching a movie and you want Xbox pause. Well, the system is here in Xbox pause as well as all the movie that is going on. And noise and reverberation of the room. The cat is walking around, the baby's crying. It's tough. It's a tough problem. So this is the high-level block diagram of what the Kinect audio looks like. So here I only put 2 microphones. You need to have at least 2. That's one of the reasons why the problem is harder. But generally we support 5.1, I think. So you have loudspeakers, and then here you have microphones. Here we have 4 microphones. So the first module is an audio acoustic echo cancellation, and it's multi-channel acoustic echo cancellation. What this does is trying to compensate the sound that comes out of the speakers here and subtract them. There is some transfer function, as I will show you soon, to cancel what's going on. The next aspect is the microphone array. So there are 4 microphones, so can I have a beam that points to the right person, trying to attenuate the rest? And that's important because there's going to be lots of noise. So at least I would say I just have a preferred direction, and the rest I attenuate. There is an additional component that reduces noise some more and echo some more. And then this goes to either the speech recognition system for voice interface, Xbox Pulse, for example, or other audio. You could, one of the applications is now you can talk to grandma over Skype-like feature communication where they don't need to have a computer. They have the TV, they are sitting in the sofa, much more convenient. So you could use this for communication as well, and the playback. So that's the high level. What I'm going to be talking about today is just this part, which is just for time, and because that's one of the areas where we did a lot of our contribution to this technology. So let me start by the microphone hardware directly. Here we have 4 microphones. The first thing that you will notice is that they are not equally spaced, which for at least me as an engineer, I like symmetrical things, okay? So the fact that it was not symmetrical is like, why are you doing this? What were you smoking? It turns out I was not smoking anything. There is a reason for everything, okay? You could have put here another one if you wanted, but it turns out it's redundant. You don't really need it because you're looking at the distance between microphone pairs as the main function to help you figure out the distance is related to the frequency that you can handle. So the distance between this microphone and this microphone tells you what is the lowest frequency you can handle. And here you have the smallest frequency, and you don't need that many. You can have all the combinations. At least intuitively, that's where it works. So the person that did a lot of this work is a person in my team called Ivan Tashev, originally from Bulgaria, has a thick Bulgarian accent, very nice guy. So at first, when he approached them and said, well, I know audio, I want to handle all the frequencies, I want this distance to be as large as possible. So how about this? No. How about this? No. So they got into a room and they finally figure out, okay, how about this? Because it's a trade-off kind of thing, right? So the longer it is, the better you can do differentiating the low frequencies. But there are some reality things that you cannot have something that is too big, right? It's not practical. So that's what they ended up doing. So in addition to that, the fact that they are not equally spaced and they cover reasonably all the bandwidth, the capsule itself, the hardware itself, this is one of the things that I think is a little bit of art and science combined. You might say, what is the acoustical response of one of these capsules just in isolation, just by itself? Well, it turns out that it depends on where you put it in outer space here. Like if I hold it here and I leave it with just thin wires, it has some response. If I put some plastic around it and rubber and hold it and ground it, it has a completely different response. Because the plastic acts as a shield and impacts at the acoustic level what is the transfer function. And how does it do it? Well, there is some of the audio wave propagation equations out there, but they are way too complicated once you start putting plastic. So the best way that we have today is that when you put it and you measure it, and you don't like what you see, well, you tweak it. And you put a rubber boot there to hold it here, and you move. And then, so there's a lot of things that went on something that is not as much science, at least today, but they are very important because it looks the same, but if it's not placed just right, and you move that 1 millimeter down, the 1 kilohertz frequency will do something funny. So that was a little bit of trial and error, which, you know, that's also engineering, right? It's not all necessarily something that you can describe with an equation. This is the directivity pattern of the microphone as was measured. What we wanted to get is something that is pointing forward or in this range. You can say, well, this is the angle that I'm going to be listening to, and everything else in the back and to the sides, I don't want to hear it. So you want something that points generally forward. Part of that was achieved with the microphone capsule itself that cancels the back. It has a directionality pattern. And part of that was the enclosure. And the proper combination came up with this, and that's already an important component of the design. So let's jump to the next step, which is the echo cancellation. So I'm going to describe here the basics of what we call mono echo cancellation, which is actually quite simple and was developed in the 50s, so a long time ago. If you have a single signal, x of t, and you pass it through speakers, it will bounce on the walls and everything, and eventually will be picked up by the microphone. So what you want, you could assume that there's a transfer function, h of t, that is equivalent to here. So you want to have a mathematical model. So can we estimate a filter here such that I subtract, I know this signal because I'm playing through the system, I can estimate this, what I think it will be, what the room response is doing, and I subtract what I get. So what I get here is the difference is just what is out there in the signal that is not correlated to what the system played back. This technology, this is kind of like the equation, very simple. So this technology was developed in the 50s and was used, of all places, the typical place when you make a phone call for the very first time. If you didn't do that, you'd be hearing the echo. And you notice that sometimes if you don't have a good connection, you still hear the echo. But by and large, this was considered a soft technology. That is canceling the electric echo, meaning the waveform, the sound in this case, is traveling at the speed of light because it's going through the cables. So that's why we often have this problem when we're talking to someone in a different continent. If it is in the same city, this is really not a problem because even if there is an echo, it's so short that the human ear doesn't notice that that's different. But when you're talking to somebody in America and back, and you're going sometimes through a satellite, that echo is important and you need to cancel it. But that's still nothing compared with acoustic. So once you do this, instead of through an electrical network, through just the air, you put the speakers there and they're captured by this microphone. And now it works okay because the gains are set up this way that there is no feedback. But you also will notice that if I were to walk just in front of the speaker, that would not be a good idea. You get the feedback, right? Because the echo is not easy to cancel it. So acoustic, the big difference there is that the length, the transfer function is longer, quite a bit longer. In the case of electrical, for the local telephone networks, maybe 20 milliseconds, no big deal, you can handle it. And even if you don't, again, it's good when you use the phone to hear a little bit of yourself, some feedback. Otherwise, you may think, and sometimes now in the digital systems that we're using, it's done artificially. Because otherwise you think that it's dead, that thing is not working. You want to hear a little bit of feedback, right? But when it's acoustic, it can take 200 milliseconds, a second. Like in a big room like this, it could easily take a second for some of the sound to go from the speaker back to the room and bouncing back. So and you might say, so what's the difference with making it longer? Mathematically, no difference. It's just the same equation. The same. It's just longer, many more taps are required for the filter. What happens is that because the system needs to estimate this filter, so now it needs to estimate many, many more coefficients. And now I'm moving. You notice that I'm moving. Well, every time that I'm moving, H is changing. So how can, if it takes me a while to estimate these coefficients, and I'm moving, it's an impossible problem. So that gives you an idea why acoustic echo cancellation is more difficult than the electrical echo cancellation. That said, probably every one of you has been using acoustic echo cancellation in communication products. Like if you use something like Skype, for example, you're using acoustic echo cancellation. And this, you're relatively close, so you may have also noticed if you're using this and you walk away quite a bit, doesn't work as well, okay? So, but still, because the filter taps is longer, but if you're at a reasonable distance, it works reasonably well, and that's something that has not been around since the 50s, like the electrical echo, but maybe I'd say these hands-free phones have been working reasonably well for at least 10 years, maybe 15. So it is at least a solved problem. But now the next step is this question is mono. All this work has been done with a single channel. So we play a single speaker. So if we want to make the problem harder, this is a quote from Mohan Sondhi from Bell Labs, who's, by the way, the inventor of the acoustic echo canceller. So, and he said, stereo, forget about 5.1, Dolby Surround. Stereo has a non-uniqueness problem that presents a fundamental limitation. Basically, it's akin to the paper that I talked about in neural networks. Can't do it. Not quite as bad, of course, but just to say that these things, you need to estimate two of them. I mean, in theory, it's the same. If you have two channels, well, you need to estimate the transfer function between this speaker and this microphone, between this speaker and this microphone, and subtract it. Well, no problem about this. If you could estimate them, yes. The problem is that the algorithms that are used to estimate them, because the signals are correlated, oftentimes doesn't work. It's almost like you have too few equations for the unknowns that you have. And that's essentially what Mohan Sondhi said. So now, the guy that came from Xbox to talk to us, he said, well, wait a minute. You need to do speech recognition at this distance with all this noise. And the guys are going to be playing 5.1, because those are the games that we sell. Oh. So we almost, Ivan, who was the person that was working on this, almost quit. But again, he said, please try. Okay. And he said, well, he tried. And he came up with a cute idea, which is, if you use this, you will hear that there is a calibration that happens at the beginning. Well, there's two filters, but I'm going to have them, rather than be independent filters, I'm going to say this filter is going to be a cascade of this guy and this guy, and this guy and this guy, and this part is going to be common. So I'm only going to estimate one filter that is common for the two, because essentially that depends on the room response. whereas these are just the specific nuances of the fact that the two speakers are located differently in the room. And that way, I avoid the non-uniqueness problem. And okay, so the first thing that he did is, well, you need to play a calibration tone. Before you speak, so well, be quiet, it tells you. We play this calibration tone, and the system is supposed to not hear anything here. That's why you need to do that. And it learns all these things, given that you know what you're playing. So the first thing that he did, of course, like any good signal processing person, he played white noise. And if you, I don't know how many of you have listened to white noise. Anyone? Not very exciting, right? So the program manager in charge of that said, well, you want to play that to my customers? You've got to be kidding, are you? So he ended up settling for this instead. It looks like a nice melody, but it wasn't so easy. It contains all the frequencies in the spectrum. So the constraint is like it has to be nice sounding, but it also needs to contain enough frequency so that we have a decent estimate of these filters. That's the advantage of white noise. It has all the frequencies. So this is another case where art meets engineering. I say, okay, give me a bunch of samples. Let me try and see how well we can do with this. Sounds beautiful, but how about this one? Eventually settle on that. And if you've calibrated the Kinect system, you will recognize that song. So now you know there is more than just a nice sounding song. There is some idea behind it. If you use this multi-channel echo cancellation, we can reduce 15 or 20 dB of echo by just doing this. And the entire pipeline, with all the components that I will be talking about, some of them, reduces 35 dB, meaning there is still some echo that is going to be left. It doesn't do a perfect job, but hopefully it's good enough for a lot of situations. So now let me switch gears and talk a little bit about the beamformer. And again, to remind you, the beamformer is we have 4 microphones. We would like to use, rather than just using one, use the combination of all to do like an array microphone that can steer towards one direction. So that if you're talking and the microphone beam is pointing to you, and if the baby's crying over there, it will attenuate the baby's sound, or the vacuum cleaner, or whatever. So this is an example of how the system works. Here we have frequency in hertz from 0 to 8,000. And here this is the angle of the array, where 0 is pointing straight and deviations. So now here the system is finding the maximum, if you look at this, at around, I don't know, 20 or 30 degrees. So it's like this, in that direction. And that's where it's amplifying, boosting those frequencies. And it detects an interference at about maybe -10. And it's just squashing it, and that's why this is blue. It's squashing it. So that's the algorithm in operation. And it reduces another 3 to 6 dB noise by doing this. Of course, it needs to first determine where is the direction to focus on, which you can program it because you know where it is, or because the system will find where most of the energy comes from. And there are some drawbacks with that. And then you do spatial filtering, which is non-linear processing, because microphone array typically is a linear processing. You're essentially weighting the different coefficients of the different frequencies differently in a linear way. But if you do spatial filtering, you can do this in a non-linear way and reduce even more noise. Finally, one of the things that Ivan, who did his PhD thesis in optimization, did is you have a bunch of components. You have the echo cancellation, you have the microphone array, you have the noise suppressor, you have a few other things that I didn't talk about. And in the end, they interact with each other in funny ways in the microphone capsule. So what you want is to find the end-to-end path to be as clean audio as possible. So what he did is he had a bunch of knobs, parameters in a lot of these algorithms, and he ran an end-to-end optimization where he says line search in many of them. I look at this and I look at the end-to-end quality. And if it's good, I look in that direction, so optimize that way. He had overall 25 parameters, time constants, thresholds, you name it. So what objective function did he use to find the right optimum? Well, he used something called PESC, which stands for Perceptual Evaluation of Sound Quality. And this is a proxy for something called MOS, Mean Opinion Score, that have been used by the speech coding community for many years. Mean Opinion Score essentially works as follows. You get something, a bunch of subjects, typically 30 or more. So let's say all of this room, you wear headphones and you listen to a bunch of samples. And you need to classify the quality from 1 to 5. 5 is best. It's like human quality, best audio, great audio system. 1 is stinks, right? And all the points in between. And you ask every one of them, every one of you, to label, well, this quality is 4 or 3. You give a few examples to calibrate internally, and then you take the average, and that's mean opinion score. So you develop a codec that has a higher mean opinion score than others, mean opinion score, and that's better sound quality. But the problem with this is that that's hard to develop programmatically, because it means that every time that you make a new algorithm, a tweak, you need to bring all these people and ask them. That takes too long. So this is a computer program that is trying to approximate that without having to have the subjects. It's not as good, but it's pretty good approximation. The problem, the advantage with this is that he can try a combination of these 25 parameters, push a program that computes the PESC, and say, oh, higher, lower, and optimize based on this. We took a large corpus, and that's how it was optimized. And these are the results. Here in the x-axis, you have the loudspeaker volume. As I mentioned, the louder that you play the sounds, the worse it's going to be, because the echo cancellation is not really canceling. Everything is more like attenuating. And here in the x and y-axis, I have the word error rate of the recognizer. So at the beginning, when we put it together, we got, when you put 100 dB SPL, sound pressure level, for those of you that don't know, which is pretty loud. This is kind of like cranking out the gain of your audio system to the max. We had like 60-some% error rates. Forget it, unusable. It got better as you lower the gain of your system. But here, if it is, this is kind of the threshold of hearing, so you can't hear anything there, it doesn't matter. Not very useful, right? So the next thing is we use the multi-channel echo cancellation, the beamformer, and all of these things, and got like a big improvement. But someone told us, well, we need to have on this task a error rate of under 10% to be useful. And we only achieve that for very, very soft sounds. But after doing the optimization that I mentioned to you just before, where all these knobs are playing end-to-end to get the best performance, we got quite a bit better. Finally, you all are experts in machine learning, pattern recognition, and you know that if you want to get good accuracy, you need to retrain the system with the same exact input that you expect to see at runtime, at test time. So, of course, we did that, and after we did that, we saw, okay, pass it, and just in time to do the engineering and ship it, so that was quite an experience. So this is so far what I plan to talk about audio processing. Any questions on this? Yes?
The user...
No, go for it, yeah.
The user have to be in front of the microphone array?
No, there is a beamformer. So as long as you're, I forgot the angle, I think it's like plus or minus 60 degrees from the center. Any direction, it will track you. If you're like beyond 60 degrees, it's not going to be looking over there. Like if you're, let's say, somewhere there, maybe that's already more than 60 degrees, and you'll be borderline kind of thing if I were the Kinect. Somewhere, so in this range, it will steer a beam, and it will scan all of these angles.
The second question is,
Well, there's another one you can think about it. Yes, in the meantime. Right. So one of the obvious things to consider is, like, if we're going to do some visual processing, which I will talk about it later, and you know there is a person there, rather than, it's kind of like making the problem easier, because now I need to see where the sound is coming from. And me as a human, I don't do just this. That would be more difficult even for me. I open my eyes and I see you moving your mouth and raising your hand. That is quite helpful for me. Why not for the machine, right? Yes, that's true. Except for the very first version, there was barely time to get even the simple things working. So that was reserved for the next version. And now, yes, we have that capability. We have face tracking and things like that, and that can be fed into the beamformer so that you know where to look at. And the user can choose where to look at, because sometimes the system detects several faces. So at least it has some ideas. Well, it's probably one of these people. I may not know exactly who, but it's one of them. Is not there where the vacuum cleaner is louder than you, but I see no face. So that was useful information that should be helpful. Yes?
How long should the person stand in front of the Kinect so that the Kinect could recognize it?
The visual aspect?
No,
the audio. I think that the key is you need, I may misquote here, but you need to speak for like about 200 milliseconds at least. So if you do like, that's where it's not good enough. You need to say something a little bit longer. That's why they put something like Xbox Play. I mean, that's probably on the order of like 1.5, 2 seconds, something like that. And that's typically enough. But if it is very short, it takes some time for the beamforming algorithm to be sure that there is no noise coming from that direction. It needs to take long enough segment. Yes?
Do you use some kind of a reinforcement level to improve the score over time?
Not currently. So this is again, I mentioned this topic because there's lots of work that could be done. This is just kind of like the first few versions of it. And we had tons of ideas, and in the spirit of saying, well, we need to ship something, help the product group, can't do everything. Let's get some of the basic things first. Next, a few more not so basics, and there's a lot more that we could do. But that would be a great research problem to look at.
Yes, I'm sorry. How do you avoid the revelation with the own user? Of the voice of the own user has also a revelation?
Yes.
How do you avoid it?
Unfortunately, we don't avoid it. We would love to avoid it. But if you're talking in a room like this, let's say this floor, this very shiny floor. So your voice, let's say this was the Kinect, okay? Your voice will have the direct path going here, but also your voice would bounce here, and because it's very shiny, high reflectant, it will come here too. And this would mess up things. Yes, that's called reverberation. Unfortunately, none of these techniques were addressing. They will just hopefully, let's say they're bouncing like in that glass, there will be some bounce as well because it's a very shiny surface. This works best in heavy carpet and curtain drapes because that's very sound absorbent. When you have that, it will work worse because now the system, let's say it bounces there, okay? Although that's a little bit harder because it's far away. But let's say there was a wall here, a window, and it bounced there. It will say, my top direction is here, so here's my beam, but this thing here comes as well. Hopefully, the beam is such that it attenuates this frequency. Now it's attenuating the noise, but it's also attenuating your own voice. Well, it's hard, right? So
but if you are looking for a user, you can confuse.
you could confuse, yes. So this thing makes the problem more difficult. Yes. No silver bullet. Other questions? Yes?
Regarding the disposition of the microphones, why are they in a line? If you place some of them outside that line, you could have a 3D shape.
Good question. So Ivan asked the product group the same question. And he said, I already working with you and you're pushing me to be big. Now you want me to be wide and you want it to be deep. No. But it is true that if you were to have the microphone's position in a, not just a one-dimensional configuration, but 2 or even 3D, you have a richer set of signals. Absolutely true. And then it's a matter of like compromise with, well, but then it's bigger, you know. And if you move it just a little bit, with the microphone tolerances, it turns out that it needs to be substantially bigger because all the microphones theoretically would be the same, but in practice they are not. One to the next slightly different. So unless they are sufficiently spaced, it doesn't really help. And if you space them sufficiently, then it's too big. So that's the trade-offs, engineering trade-offs. Other questions? Okay, so this is so far for audio. Let's jump into the gesture and video and depth part. So the goal now is to capture depth, to find out how far is the scene, have like a three-dimensional map of what's going on in, say, this room. So how can you do that? Well, not a new problem. If you've watched some of the animated movies that Pixar or Disney makes, like Avatar and others, you know how to do it. You have to wear this fancy suit with these things that look like ping pong balls here, and they are like highly reflectance. So now we film you, and now we have all these points, and we know which one it is, and we can track them in real time. So now we can replace the actress in this case and do computer animation and do all kinds of things. So we know how to do depth tracking. Well, it's a little bit expensive. And if we were trying to do a gaming scenario where you don't wear anything and say, oh, you don't have to wear the Wii, but you need to wear this suit. Not very exciting, right? But, so now that's the question of, well, what is the trade-offs? This is very accurate, high frame rate, and if you want one of the best possible systems, this is a good way to go. But, you know, it has the limitations. There are other sets of technologies where if you wear all kinds of things, you could do depth quite well. But here comes Kinect, and there is the depth camera. And the depth camera is the key component in doing the gesture processing and everything that you've seen so far. How does this camera work? It works with something called structure light. And in fact, structure IR light, infrared light. So the way it works is that it shines, the projector shines some infrared, and it shines some dots that look pseudo-random. And this is what the camera would see. And based on that, it can recover the depth. So here in this case, darker means it's closer to the camera, and gray means it's further away. That's kind of the depth map. So this is what the RGB capture, and you can see in black you see the person who is closer to the camera. This is, by the way, Jamie Shelton, the person in Microsoft Research Cambridge that did a lot of the work on this technology. So if we were trying to detect gestures, I mean, people in the computer vision community have been working with this type of image for quite a few years, and they've learned it's very difficult because color, lighting, different people. How do I know if you move the hand versus, like, you know, this thing here is just a very difficult problem. So the hope is that if you were to look at an image like this, which is a depth image, it's much easier to figure out what's going on than just handling the RGB image. Although theoretically you could do it, this makes the problem a lot simpler, as I will show you. So how does this work? Some of you, how many of you know the principle of structure light for depth? So it's like maybe 1/4, 1/3 of you. So this may bore you, but I will review for the rest. The basic idea is the projector projects not just light, but light with some structure. For example, let's assume that projects just stripes, like this, right? Now the camera is watching the stripes. If it was a perfect plane, we would just see exactly this. But guess what? The surface has curves and depths. And if you have an object like this, for example, because some of the things are further and other things are closer, what the camera is going to detect is like a curve like that. So the idea is simple. If you use triangulation, you can say, well, I know this is what was sent, but I get this. So what is the depth that the object must have so that this matches? And you can do the triangulation to figure out the depth. That's the basic idea. Of course, in this case, it won't work, because how do you know this line is this one and not this one? So you need to make the pattern easily recognizable. So it cannot be like this, where one line is the same as the other one, right? You need to pick a different pattern. And in fact, what is picked is a random pattern of dots. It's actually not random, it's pseudo-random. So it looks random if you don't know what it is, but actually the system knows exactly where each pixel was, and it's trying to undo the transformation in a way that is not confusable. So this is like a chess board, and you look at this, and if you zoom in, this is what you get. So that's the basic principle behind depth cameras. And this, well, this is if you overlay the depth camera on top of the RGB image, this is what you get. As you can see, this is a plot of the system when the user is moving the hands like that and walking in. So this is what the chip of the Kinect camera does. It produces an image like this after it does the triangulation with the structure light and all this. So this chip was provided by a company in Israel called PrimeSense. So PrimeSense have been developing applications for depth camera, again for the military, so that it knows what distance the subject is, and I know exactly how much angle I need to shoot my cannon or my missile or whatever for military applications. So they were expensive technologies. And they did all the triangulation. And their output is this. If you get the open Kinect API, you will get this data. That's the data that you get, and that's it. What Jamie Schott and others in MSR Cambridge did is, okay, this is a better and easier input to look into to detect gestures and doing things like this than just the raw RGB, which is just too difficult. But you still need to detect whether I'm playing tennis and when and how and exactly, or what is that I'm doing. And this just makes the problem easier, but you still need to build all those computer vision algorithms. This is the side view and the top view. So again, RGB or depth, you could try to do, be the cowboy and say, well, I'm going to do it without RGB. And if you have tried to do computer vision algorithms like that on RGB, you will see that it's very hard. This is a funny example where it's hard to detect that it's a person in this case, because if you just look at color, this looks like just the path, right? That's a pathological case, but that's just to indicate that RGB is just a lot harder, whereas in depth, if you were to use depth image, this person would stand out a lot more. So RGB only works well with lit. So we heard that a lot of the customers wanted to be in the room and darken the light so that they're dancing like they're in the disco. Well, good luck with RGB. There's no light, nothing you can get, not gonna work. Background clutter, all kinds of junk. If you do it in the lab and there's nothing there, you can get something. But hey, guess what? What we found out is people want to use this in their family rooms, where they have the coffee table, they have all the cushions, they have all kinds of things going on, all kinds of junk. So not good. The scale is unknown in the RGB. You don't know the distance, but if you have depth, you know the size of the person as well. So they have a lot more information. Clothing, depends on what you're wearing, skin color, the lighting. Well, you will get sometimes good results, sometimes not good. So it's much easier with depth, which works in low light because it's emitting the IR. The person pops up from the background very well, so it makes the problem much easier. The scale is known, so that just because you see an object, because you know how far deep it is, you can interpret it much better than, say, a person. Is this a person that is far away, or is just a random object? Well, in RGB, you don't really know, whereas here you know. There are still some problems. There are shadows with depth image. They're mixing pixels, so it's not like it's a panacea where it solves all the problems. But so this is just an introduction to depth sensor, the depth sensor that comes raw from the PrimeSense chip in Kinect. Now I will tell you next about the software and the computer vision algorithms that were developed to take that image data and do something interesting with it. So what is the problem that we're trying to solve? You have our idealized subject there. And what you want to do is find the joints. Like I would like to see, where is the elbow? Where's the wrist? Where's my knee, my foot? All of these joints, which you don't see, right? But if we want to detect whether I'm playing this or I'm dancing, that's ideally what you like to do, right? So you have a skeleton here, idealized skeleton that you can't see. And what you like to be able to track this over time, so that as the person moves, you can track it, X, Y, and Z coordinates, and all the angles. And in fact, Kinect tracks 20 body joints in real time. So that's the algorithm of skeletal tracking. So if instead of having just the RGB or even the depth image, you could get these joints over time. Now, doing this, all of a sudden, to play ping pong or like dancing is a much simpler problem because you abstract it out and you focus on where the joints should be, right? It's a more useful type of representation. But it is hard. It's not a simple thing, you know. This is again another artificial example. This is obviously not a joint, but you know, to a depth, if you just look at depth image, why not? We have people of all kinds of sizes. This thing should work with all of them. The first version didn't work on some subset of them. The product was not very happy. And there are small people, big people. And guess what? A lot of the test data that we collected, all kinds of clutter in the image. What is this my subject? Probably not. We don't want to let your dog control the TV, right? The Xbox. So how does this work? And again, this is the work of Jamie Shotton and other of his collaborators in MSR Cambridge. This is the raw depth image. This is what it looks like. I mean, here we actually have more resolution than what you see here. Look, it all looks black, but of course we have the gradient there. The first part is to infer the body parts. You see the different colors represent the different segments of your body. And once we have that, we can hypothesize the body joints, which are hidden to anyone, including us. But we can still, as humans, we can hypothesize where my skeleton is when I do this, right? And that's what the system needs to do. So there's like all these steps. And after that, we need to track over time this movement. So this is an example. This is the raw depth image as the person is moving. And this is what the inferred body parts are. I guess he's trying a boxing game or something. And moves around and still, sometimes there's occlusion. I do this while I'm occluding my shoulder. Well, should still work. I bend over, turn around, and there's a lot of occlusions, typical problems in computer vision. So just the fact that this is a better, a simpler, more accurate input data to work from doesn't mean all problems are solved. There's still quite a bit of work. So how does this work? Not surprisingly, we're machine learning guys, so we apply our favorite hammer, machine learning. In this case, it's a discriminative approach, as in many of the computer vision problems. So we have this image, and what we have is we had some humans label the parts of the image. So this is the hand, this is the forearm, blah, blah, blah. And now we have, for each pixel, let's say this pixel here, we know the ground truth because some of our team had labeled that's the hand. In this case, maybe the right hand even. And we have a window of pixels around it. And we build a classifier that says, my input is this window of pixels, and my label is, this is the hand. Build a classifier that will do that and not confuse it with the knee or the leg or all these other things. So just learn the classifier from data. That's the high-level idea. Okay, so how did we do that? In this particular case, Jamie and his colleagues decided to use a decision tree algorithm. Essentially, you're here, and it asks a question. A question in this case is a function of some sort. Is this bigger than theta 1, some threshold? If the answer is yes, then it has a histogram of all possible, for these cases, all the possible distribution of left and right hand, arm, you know, here. And you can compute the entropy of this classification. How good is this question in reducing the ambiguity? Before, we have 20 body parts. We have no idea whether it's your hand or your head. After I ask this question, do I have, it's not a uniform distribution, is it better? Have I reduced some of the ambiguity? Is my entropy lower? If yes, that's a good question. If no, that's not a good question. Let's say that in this case, after we've trained the system, it goes here, and now it's, well, let me ask another question. And after I do that, this entropy goes down, and I'm getting better and better on determining what is the body part. So let me give you a couple of examples. This is like, I guess, the best case scenario where you can see all of the body parts and all the joints are easily to hypothesize. And someone labeled the ground truth this way. This case is more difficult, a more challenging case where there is occlusion. You can see he's occluding some of the joints. And this is still the ground truth. So some of them are occluded. So how does the algorithm, the decision tree algorithm, work in this case? So if I have depth 2, so I have only 2 questions, of course, I can only have, in this particular case, 2 possible classes. So we know that's not going to work. You need at least as many questions as 2 to the n. N questions, 2 to the n has to be larger than the number of body parts that you're trying to recognize. So 2, we know that's not going to work. 3, now we can recognize more body parts. 4, more. 5, 6. And at this point, we already have enough depth that we could potentially, theoretically, recognize all the body parts, except that the accuracy is not that good, so we still want to add more questions. And as we do more, it gets better and better, even when there is occlusion. Not perfect, but it is quite a bit better. And here is worse, but still reasonable. So still not a simple problem. So the other thing is how many trees. You can use boosted trees. So use 1 tree, and we stop at a given point. So now I'm going to use another tree to look at the errors that the first tree made. That's the boosting case. And as more the machine learning people will tell you, the more trees you use, the higher the accuracy, right? And that you see the input, the ground truth, and what you get with 1 tree, with 2 trees, that is cleaning up some of the errors here and there, and with 3 trees. And that's, I think, where they stopped, the law of diminishing returns. So the next step is to go from the body parts to the joint hypothesis. So now I have, let's say this, I want to find out where the joints are. And let's see what the algorithm does. I'm not going to talk about that aspect. But you would see here the depth image. Here you see the different colors of the body parts. And these dots are like where the hypothesis of the joints are. You know, the front view, top view, and side view. So this is roughly what the subroutine of skeletal tracking is doing. It takes the depth image from the prime sense chip, and then it does all this processing, and it has as an output where the location of all the joints are over time, which will make the problem easier to detect gestures if you use that kind of input. So that's kind of like what we thought. Yes, we should do that. I mean, I'll repeat the question. Can you use some kinematic models to do a better job? And the answer is yes, you could. The first version, because of time, didn't do that. But people are working on a better model that it knows. Like the first version, there would be cases where the leg would appear here. So, that makes no sense. If you use some model to regularize the positions, because you know the relation between the joints and all that, you should be able to do a lot better. And although the hardware hasn't changed, every time that you download, you press, yes, I want a new update of the software, some of these things get better and better. Any more questions on this before I go to the head pose and facial expression? Yes?
Alex, what about that interference between two connected sensors in the same place, just bouncing the pattern of infrared lights?
Yes, you got it. That's a problem. When you put more than one Kinect sensor, now what happens is that one of the cameras is shining light, and the other one is picking the reflection from the light that is shining and the light of the other Kinect, so it could get confused. So if you design carefully your random pattern, you may reduce that problem, but not eliminate it. There are other tricks that you could do, like saying, well, if I know that I have two cameras, can I shine one there, have the other one be silent for a while, capture it, and then I'll be silent and alternate kind of time multiplexing to avoid interference. That'll be one possibility. But you need to be able to control the clock of the two. If you can't do that, then you are going to have that interference. And either you need to handle it, retrain the system that way, or have a new algorithms. And we are all looking at the next version of algorithms that handle some of these problems. Yes? Right. So one of the problems that we had is that it was very expensive to manually label all of these things, right? So we all know in machine learning, the more data, the better. So just give me more. And so, well, I already had someone with headaches from label the arms and, you know, with hundreds of images. And you want me to do like thousands and hundreds of thousands? Get a break. So we need to figure out, now we have a lot of data, but it's quote unlabeled, or at least not labeled that way. We may have labels of someone hitting the ball. That, you could bring lots of people and say, well, do this with your right hand. That we can do. But to label all the body parts is much more painful because you need to do it by hand. So one of the areas of research should be, can you develop algorithms and marginalize over these hidden values? Because it's easy to collect data. Now we have lots of data from people playing and dancing. And they can tell you, this is the step you need to do, so you can assume that that's what they're doing. But you don't need anyone to label, this is where my knee is, because it's just too much manual work. Can you marginalize over that? That will have that advantage, but it's much more complicated of a problem, right? So yes, there are lots. That's why I mentioned this area is rich with research problems, because you could imagine if you were to do that, and in fact Jamie and some of his colleagues are looking into things like that, then you could use a lot more data, except that now you don't have labels for everything. You have labels, high-level labels, but not labels for each individual skeleton, which is much more expensive to get.
So it's the other way around. We usually import it from low level to high level, the other way, right?
Yes, I mean, the thing is that you know that more data is better, but once you go to some point, the labeling of the data is expensive and painful. So one of the things that Jamie is working on is even the user teaching the system gestures. So not the programmer or like even the developer, but say, if I do this, it's like I'm attracting attention. Let's say one of the gestures, what is raise my hand? Let's say in a classroom, right, for example. And no, there is no game or no program that Microsoft has coded to do that. But could I do this and bring all of you to say, well, come here, sit in front of this, raise your hand, and I just go and do minimal labeling, and the rest happens automatically. Wouldn't that be nice, right? Because that's easier. You don't need to color the elbow, or like, I cannot see your legs because they are behind the table, but in other cases I may be able to. It's kind of like a pain to do all this work. But if you can just say, just raise your hand, that gesture, that would be better. But that means that the algorithm is much more complicated from our point of view, right? Because now we don't have that intermediate step labels. We need to do it automatically, much more. But it's also very interesting research, right? Any more questions? Yes?
Using 3D models. I mean, not humans, but if you render 3D...
So I'm glad you asked me that question. Remind me to buy you a coffee or a drink after all, because that's what we're doing for the next, next part. I am going to show you something that was released, I think it was about a year ago. It was called Avatar Kinect. It was one kind of like a demo in the AI labs of Kinect that was developed by a team. At that point, it was reporting to me also. And the idea here is we are doing already avatars. So when you're dancing, there is, by the way, you go to some of the shopping malls where they have this, and you see people dancing. It's very popular, the dance game, right? And it's funny because you look at the avatar, and it's like a great actor or actress dancing beautifully. And you look at, if you're just looking, you see the person doing terrible dancing, pathetic. But he's having fun because he or she's only watching the screen, and the dancer is doing a really good job, dancing really good. So maybe the dancer is doing, and the other is terrible, right? But you feel like you're good. So this is one case where the avatar is, we have an avatar on the screen mimicking not what the user is doing actually, but actually doing better than the user, so that it's fun and you spend the time. But that work was not only from here down, really. So we were not doing anything on the head. It's just like where you're moving your legs, you're moving your arms, or you do this step or that step. But we know that the head has a lot of information. Most of the time, we as humans use the head as key. Are you looking at me or not? Are you finishing your email or you're looking at this? I understand you need to finish your emails. That's very important information, right? And the first version didn't do that. So this work was targeted towards looking at what happens here, from here up. And there's a small region compared to the knees and the joints and the elbows, but very powerful because it can detect the gaze, the pose, and the gaze, and even other expressions such as smiles, eyebrows. If we could capture that, what could you do? Well, now you could animate the avatar, not just this movement, but also the facial expressions. So this is a demo of the system that was shipped about a year ago, trying to do that. Where now the system will capture your facial expressions and transmit it to the avatar. What could you do if you do that?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Ready for the big game?
Bring it on. All right, guys. 5 minutes to kickoff. Let's hear your predictions. Go.
Tigers by 2 touchdowns.
No way, guys. The Ducks are gonna run all over you.
In your dreams, the Ducks are going down.
Hey guys, welcome back.
Hey everybody.
So I love tonight's episode. What did you guys think?
5 stars. Heather rocks.
Ditto. She's the only reason I watch the show.
Too much drama. 2 stars.
Tough crowd. Facebook fans, what do you think?
So this was kind of a fun project too. And you can imagine how a lot of these days we have these social networks where you're interacting with someone virtually through just texting. Wouldn't it be fun to have like a get together with your friends where you have an avatar? One of the things that is most popular in Xbox is all the avatars. I know my kids spend a lot of time just dressing them and changing them and make them like funny nose or weird ears or like putting a strange hat or all kinds of things, right? So imagine if now you've spent so much time dressing your avatar and you can say, well, let's have a party with my friends and I'm gonna dress today like funny, doing this, and you go and talk, but you see how, if you're not physically in the same room, you have the illusion of being in the same room. And I know that I'm looking at you and he knows that I'm looking at you and not just in the abstract, and I'm looking at him and my profile is different. That gives you that illusion that you're physically in the same place. And you can transmit not just the voice when you're having a conversation through voice. A voice is obviously the most important channel. But it's like, if I do this, that's so powerful. You want to transmit that. And you could do it with video as well. But all this social network now is looking in the virtual world where you just don't want to transmit some of these things. And there's like something interesting that you could imagine there. So what is the technology used behind it? And you mentioned about the 3D deformable models. Well, that's precisely what we use for this application. We have Cha developed a 3D model that he had done for the face with lots of triangles there. And now the question is, if we can have an image and transform it into this space where now what we have is all these triangles, can you go into from that domain and understand where someone is raising their eyebrows or smiling? So the first thing that we have is that we have in this space, we have a vector, Q, that is the sum of several contributions. The first one has to do with the basic shape of our face that we know. Then there is a component that has to do with the size. How far are you? And rotation. Well, maybe it's the same head, but if you're like this or this, the triangle mesh is going to be different. So I want to be able to have this programmatic from a generative point of view. If I tell you how far are you, where you're looking this way or that way, then I can get the high-level approximation. The last component has to do with the facial expressions. Because if I'm at the same distance, the same size, same orientation, and I'm smiling or not, then there will be the last component that I want to estimate. So what we do is an analysis by synthesis mechanism, where you search over all possible spaces of parameters like that, and you find the ones that after you do that match the best with what your system observed. So you start maybe here where this curve doesn't quite match right, and after you iterate, you get to the matching point, and that's how you extract these features. And those are the features, the parameters of of the transformation here, these parameters, that are transmitted through this Avatar Kinect demo. So that at runtime, if I see this, I can reconstruct. And instead of putting this mesh, I can put your avatar, and whatever you want, so that you're wearing the right hair that you want, or the head, hat, or earrings, whatever you want. This is just to say, all the things that you need to do for initialization and all these other tricks, because the depth image is kind of noisy on a single shot. So you need to do the average and then add the texture on top. So you can have from this RGB, and this works on RGB, but we are trying to incorporate both the depth image as well because it's helpful, and you can get the texture model. So again, the high-level algorithm works as follows. You have the input, the RGB image, and the depth image. First thing is we need to face detection. So where is the face? If I have the Kinect here, I need to detect many faces. I think the algorithm can track up to 10, I believe, something like that. I'm not sure if that's true in the current version. 10 faces. Once you have a face, you need to align it and find out where these points are. Those are the critical points that we want to find, and we need to do that whether you're wearing glasses or not, depending on different hairstyles, color skin, everything. So, some complexity. And then you initialize the model, and you find the output and iterate until you find the right solution. So that's a high-level description of how the audio, depth, image, skeletal tracking, and the pose and face tracking. So Kinect has revolutionized gaming. I mean, I can't believe how many people are playing with this that were not shooting them the Martians before, but it opened up a new audience. But not just gaming. There are lots of opportunities for doing things that are not a game that could benefit from this kind of technology. And that's a testament of the SDK and all the many people that are playing with this technology for applications that we hadn't even thought of. Voice and gestures are natural for users. The idea here is that we want to use natural user interface so that you don't need to learn how to operate the device. All you need to do is, well, you know how to speak? Speak. You know how to use your body? Do it. You don't need, that's why it's so natural. No need to read instructions. Jump into there. If you see someone do it, you probably can do it too. But at the same time, it's natural for the users, and that's why they want to use it. But it poses lots of challenges from the engineering and research point of view. Not an easy problem at all. And it was a big struggle to get the first version out. The second version, and now the third, every 6 months or so, they release new versions. They're getting better, but there are still lots of problems. And I heard already today a number of questions, very good questions, on possible new enhancements. So yes, all of them, we're not done. There are lots of work that could be done in this space. And this is just the beginning, so I hope that you can help us improve the technology. I talked earlier about deep neural networks, because I think it's an area that is new, that we can engage a lot of the researchers in this room and beyond to make advances. And this is another area where I think it's very exciting, but there's still lots of problems that are open. So thank you. Gaming things, and I was, we don't want to hear. They had just finished, and as I said, it was really close because it wasn't. Although the prototypes worked, the product was not working for many things. It just took so much time just to get everything settled and shipped properly that they didn't even want to hear it. Whereas in 6 months, I bet someone will do it. In 1 week, someone could figure out, and it led the community just wild. Now, lots of researchers playing with it. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, which is really exciting, right? In fact, when I prepared this talk back in December 2011, there were already 62 pages of this website. Every one contains several experiments, some guy trying something. Really exciting. Every few hours, new applications. So a lot of researchers are using this. So one of our friends in the product group came up with a video of saying, okay, you convinced us, let's move ahead and look at things other than gaming. What are the kind of things that we can do to increase even more the imagination of researchers? And they came up with this video, which I thought was pretty nice.
We started with a sensor that turned voice and movement
Are you here?
into
Okay.
magic.
Xbox. Play.
We thought this would be fun to play with, and it was. Something amazing is happening. The world is starting to imagine things we hadn't even thought of. Unexpected things. Hopeful things. Beautiful things. Inspired things. Which is why, even though the world keeps asking us what
great TV. My son once punched me with the wig here. I remember that. So we were quite involved in Microsoft Research in the development of Kinect, and we loved it because it was really fun technology. But the thing that really struck me from a social point of view is when I was reading some of the reviews, and there was this reporter that had written an article about the Kinect and was describing the hardware and all the things that you could do. And he had a little story that was really touching. So I was there, and there was my 6-year-old son. He was looking at me, not saying anything. Normally, he can't keep his eyes on attention on anything for more than a few seconds. He was there looking for minutes and minutes, constantly looking without doing anything. And after a while, he comes and tells me, "Dad, I also want to play with the Force." So that was so touching because the kid, to him, in technology, he's been watching so many science fiction movies that this is just natural. And so, well, of course, the Force, I've seen Star Trek and Star Wars. I want to play with the Force too, and I want to kill the bad guys with my hands. And so this is really something that gets into a whole new generation of users. That's why it was so exciting. And it was thrilling to see that we actually have something to do with creation of this technology. And in fact, it was quite successful in the marketplace. I mean, according to the Guinness World of Records, it was sold like 8 million in the first 60 days. So that's quite amazing. And I have to tell you, we were working on the device very directly with them, and we had doubts. Not that it would sell that many, but it would sell at all. Because we look at the ship date when they were going to ship it and say, but this is not working. How are you going to ship this? It's like, oh, we couldn't believe it. So this is one of these cases where eventually you try and you cannot get the rabbit out of the hat. And finally, at the last minute, you manage to do it. But it was a close call, let me tell you. So what does this Kinect sensor have? I mean, all of you probably, I guess, have seen what it looks like from outside. So let me show you what it looks from inside in case you haven't seen it. And this is what it is. Although maybe some of you have taken the plastic out and seen it. I like some of these tinkers that play with this. Basically it has an infrared projector, and you may have noticed that this, which is this one here, essentially shines some light. And it looks like red, but actually you're seeing a tiny, tiny fraction of that light because most of them is infrared, which you cannot see. But you see a little bit of red. So the idea is that it shines a lot of light, illuminates the scene, and I will show you how, but you can't see it. So you can play when it's dark, which is like a nice thing, or it doesn't bother the interference of all these lights. We'll see why it's important that this is infrared as opposed to using the visible spectrum. Here you have an infrared camera. So what this means, and we have the RGB camera to take a picture of the normal light, the normal camera that you can imagine. So we have a camera like this, and then another camera that takes another picture. But this picture is different because it's taking a different light spectrum, infrared. Why is that important? Well, hold on, and you'll find out a little bit later. And we have 4 microphones and a motor. This thing will move up and down, USB cable, And these guys, once they're going to make millions of them, they manage, doesn't matter how technology. All right, so just to let you know that I was born in Spain, so I have the Mediterranean culture, so I'm willing to improvise more than other cultures, I suppose. And I wasn't planning on talking about this, but I also, during lunch, heard a few people that said, oh, it would be interesting to hear more details about how Kinect works under the covers, under the hood, since there are like a number of you, at least, that are running some research experiments using Kinect. So I figured, well, maybe I had one slide deck there that I could use to at least tell you some of the work that goes underneath the Microsoft Kinect device that we did actually in MSR. So let me first see, because it's quite popular in the United States, but I'm not sure how popular it is here. How many people know what the Kinect, this device, is? Could you raise your hand? Okay, so most people know. So the idea is here that you are the controller. The revolution from the point of view of the person that doesn't know technology is that there was a lot of excitement with the Wii, because you could hold this and you don't need to have this controller that has all these buttons. That there were a lot of people that love it because it's like shooting more and more Martians and more people in aircrafts and everything. But many other users just didn't really enjoy it. Whereas with the Wii, you could play. So this was kind of like the idea of the next generation, where you don't even need to hold anything, just use your body. And that's what they use, you are the controller, the slogan. This is just for those of you that may not know the kind of games that you have. You could be running, playing people. You're holding anything. You don't need to be afraid that you're gonna throw your G. How much technology do you put? They can put it for like a small price. So by the way, there were some depth cameras, which is what this and this do before. This was not a new idea. If you look at the research community, you'd see depth cameras, around for a while. Most of them were used in military applications. You can imagine that the soldiers in the military was very interested in seeing exactly where is the target so that I can shoot it, right? But these devices were quite expensive. There was like $10,000, $40,000, $50,000 for some of these devices. So it's quite a feat of engineering just to shrink all of that, make it much cheaper, and in many cases, better than the expensive ones. I don't want to know if the military is using this for these applications. I don't want to know, but I would not be surprised. So now I'm going to tell you, this is kind of like the introduction of Kinect for gaming. But there are lots of things going on using the Kinect for more than just games. So I will tell you, just give you a picture of what those things are, and then go in more depth into some of the technologies, especially that we develop in MSR, on audio, depth, and skeletal tracking and head pose. So one of the things that was very exciting is a week after, I think the Kinect launched in November 20th, 2010. A week after, there was this website called Kinect Hacks. Someone had figured out how to intercept the depth signal and plug it into a PC and do all kinds of things, all kinds of interesting things. We were telling the product group, we should think about providing some SDK for researchers, hobbyists, and other folks that want to use this for other applications other than just gaming. And we said, I bet in 6 months, someone will figure out how to do it if you don't do it, so we might as well do it ourselves. And they were so busy with the